Good evening and welcome. You're watching the NewsTrack. I'm Rahul. Kanwal. What's going on in the lower reaches of the Pir Panjal in Jammu and Kashmir? Why are we seeing one terror attack after another hitting hard against the Indian Army? Why aren't we being able to stop this? Are we now seeing a deadly China-Pakistan tango? And given the fact that there is a massive outbreak of politics around these terror attacks, what does this mean for the 2024 general elections? And what does this mean for India's posture and position in Jammu and Kashmir? Those very serious questions around national security are my top focus on the NewsTrack.
Four army soldiers shot dead. Not just any terror encounter. Third big Rajouri attack in 2023. Is Rajouri new Jammu and Kashmir terror hotspot? Time for another Sarv Vinash. Big focus on NewsTrack.
We get you the latest ground reports from Rajouri. We look at what's happening at the Army headquarters and the Ministry of Defence. We look at the politics that's playing out. Let's get started. Here are the headlines I'm tracking tonight. Suspension showdown escalates. India Alliance parties stage protest at Jantar Mantar in the capital. Parliamentary Affairs Minister accuses Rahul Gandhi of instigating protests inside the Lok Sabha. Opposition parties target the Modi government after the Rajouri terror attack. Farooq Abdullah rakes up Article 370. Uddhav Sena questions the crackdown on Pak-sponsored terror. Karnataka minister's private jet splurge sparks outrage. BJP attacks the Siddaramaiah government for wasting money amid the drought in the state. Olympian Bajrang Punia returns his Padma Shri award in protest against the newly elected wrestling body chief. Punia writes to PM Modi, says Beti is forced to quit the sport. Priyanka Gandhi Vadra meets Sakshi Malik. 640 new COVID infections reported in India today, but only 22 cases of the new COVID variant JN1 detected so far. French President Emmanuel Macron will be the chief guest for the Republic Day 2024. Macron says he'll be there to celebrate with his dear friend Modi. 4 army soldiers were shot dead in Rajouri last night after an army convoy came under attack. But this is not just a normal random terror encounter. This was the third attack in Rajouri just this year. Top defense sources have told India today that Pakistan and China seem to be working in tandem to revive terrorism in the Poonch sector in an attempt to deflect attention from what's going on in Ladakh. Our defense correspondent Manjeet Negi with our lead story tonight.
Four soldiers of the Indian Army shot dead by terrorists as they rushed towards an encounter site in Jammu and Kashmir. An encounter in the upper reaches of the Rajouri sector near Thana Mandi. Sources tell India today this wasn't an ordinary ambush. As the army responded to the initial contact with terrorists, a puppet front of Pakistan's banned terrorist organization, the Jaish-e-Mohammed, called the PAFF, took responsibility for the attack on security forces, releasing what appears to be body camera footage.
There are reports that the location of the terrorists, has been traced. So that is why we can see that reinforcements are being sent, and in Indian Army personnel are moving towards the hilltop, and the priority is to locate the terrorists and neutralize them as soon as possible.
But the Rajouri incident is exploding beyond this battlefield in Thana Mandi. For starters, it's the third incident in this sector this year where the army has suffered multiple casualties. Less than a month ago, 5 army soldiers, including 2 young officers, were killed in action not far from this encounter site. Earlier, in May 2023, 5 Army Special Forces soldiers were killed in action fighting terrorists in the same general area. 2 years ago, 9 soldiers were killed in action in 2 separate encounters in the Rajouri sector. A clear pattern has emerged. Despite overall levels of terror coming down across Jammu and Kashmir after the abrogation of Article 370, the Poonch Rajouri sector remain ablaze with high casualty incidents. And this is where the story escalates. Top defense sources have told India today that both Pakistan and China have been actively cooperating to trigger a new wave of terrorism in Jammu and Kashmir. The aim is to put pressure on the Indian Army to withdraw troops from the eastern Ladakh sector and redeploy forces south of Pir Panjal. The reason? In 2020, when the India-China standoff began in eastern Ladakh, as part of the effort to bolster force levels at the friction points, including near Galwan, the army had pulled out units of the Rajouri Poonch area and redeployed the uniform force in Ladakh. This created a major force gap in this area, providing a clear opportunity for the China-Pakistan nexus to reactivate terror south of Pir Panjal. While China gains from pressure on the Indian Army to possibly consider redeployment of troops from Ladakh to Poonch and Rajouri, the Pakistan Army gets to drum up emotions in view of elections around the corner in Pakistan. With Sunilji Bhatt in the Rajouri sector and Manjeet Singh Negi in Delhi. Bureau Report, India Today.
Operation Sarp Vinash was undertaken by the army to flush out terrorists during April-May 2003 in the Rajouri Poonch belt of the Jammu region. 65 terrorists were killed that year. With a surge in terror attacks, is it time to launch yet another Sarp Vinash?
During the Kargil War of 1999, large number of troops were pulled out of the counter-terror grid in Jammu and Kashmir and pushed up on the Kargil heights to push back against Pakistani soldiers who had infiltrated all along the Mushko Valley, Dras, Kaksar, Kargil and Balalik areas. South of Pir Panjal in the early 2000s, a large number of Pakistani hybrid terror teams had established their bases on the higher reaches surrounding Poonch and Rajouri towns. There were a spate of terror strikes targeting both soldiers and civilians all along the Jammu-Rajouri Poonch axis. The army intelligence inputs indicated the presence of more than 100 terrorists in the mountains of Hilkaka around Poonch and Rajouri. The Counter-Insurgency Division Romeo Force was tasked to draw up plans to evict Pakistani intruders. General N.C. Vij, then Chief of Army Staff, and Major General Lidar, then Division Commander, launched a 4-phase operation. Phase 1, November to Jan 2002 to 2003, prepare helipad and mule tracks. Phase 2, February to April 2003, take control of adjoining heights. Phase 3, May to June 2003, clear area around Hilkaka of all civilians. Phase 4, June to July 2003, mount main operation on Poonch Rajouri heights. In the 4-phase sustained operation, more than 65 terrorists were neutralized, including border action teams of the Pakistani army that comprised doctors of the Pakistan army treating terrorists in caves. The remaining terrorists fled back to Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, resulting in breaking the back of the terror outfit south of Pir Panjal. However, with relocation of troops to eastern Ladakh in 2020 post-Galwan, terrorists backed by Pakistan have once again established bases in the higher reaches of the Poonch-Rajouri heights, clearly indicating it is time for Sarpvinash 2.0. Gaurav Sawant for India Today.
The Rajouri terror attack has triggered a massive political fight. Former Jammu and Kashmir Chief Minister Farooq Abdullah raked up Article 370, declaring that terrorism had not ended in the state quite clearly. Congress and other India alliance parties are also gunning for the centre for failing to stop these terror attacks.
The Jaish-e-Mohammed attack on an army convoy in Rajouri has triggered a political slugfest. First to train guns on the Modi government was former Jammu and Kashmir Chief Minister Farooq Abdullah, who raked up Article 370.
ये 370 जिम्मेवार है टेररिज्म का, कहते थे ना, रियासत बैकवर्ड हो गई थी इनके वक्त में, है? आज भी आतंकवाद है, अभी आपने देखा कि कहाँ पहुंचे हम, आतंकवाद बंद नहीं हुआ.
Congress and other India alliance members also hit out at the centre for failing to crack down on Pakistan-sponsored terror.
It is very sad part, and we salute the sacrifice of those brave Jawans. But in the meantime, Mr. Amit Shah, who continues to be in a denial mode on the happenings in Kashmir, must take responsibility.
कल का जो पूंछ में हमला हुआ है, ये एक प्रकार से रिपीट ऑफ पुलवामा है. पुलवामा में इसी प्रकार से हमला हुआ था. सरकार सो रही थी, आज भी सरकार सो रही है. 370 हटाने का जश्न आप मना रहे हो ना, तो ये देखिए क्या हो गया है.
This year alone, there have been 13 terror incidents in Rajouri, resulting in the death of 11 security personnel. In Poonch, there have been 8 terror incidents in 2023 alone, with 5 security personnel and 15 terrorists killed. There were also protests in Jammu against the attack in Rajouri. Will India's netas unite on issues of national security and put India first? Bureau Report, India Today.
Joining me now in the studios is my colleague Gaurav Sawant. He leads military and strategic affairs coverage for us. He's covered Op Sarpvinash 1 and understands this belt. He's travelled extensively, as has Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni, who's been Chief of the Staff. He's been 14 Corps head, and he's also been DG of Infantry for the Indian Army. For political perspective, I'm joined on this broadcast by Syed Zafar Islam of the BJP, Mohan Kumaramangalam from the Congress, and for a IB intelligence perspective, I have Yashovardhan Azad, who's been former Special Director of our Intelligence Bureau. Now, Gaurav, we know that we moved a division of the Indian Army out of this area and we took those forces to the line of actual control. But is that the only reason why we're seeing so many terror attacks? Because something seems amiss in the manner in which this attack was carried out and the attacks that happened prior to this. This usually isn't the case. To be able to target the army successfully in the same region repeatedly seems to say something is terribly off.
Rahul, you're absolutely right. Something is terribly off. These wide gaps that have been created with an entire division being pulled out, the uniform force being pulled out post-Galwan in 2020, it's created a huge area where between 8 to 10,000 troops have been removed, and the balance of troops are now having to patrol. If they were earlier patrolling or were responsible for a 3 kilometer or a 4 kilometer area high in the mountains, now they're responsible for 10 kilometers areas in those mountains. So there are huge gaps. And Rahul, there is a history to this. When the Kargil war happened in 1999, that's the time a large number of troops were pulled out, both south of Pir Panjal and north of Pir Panjal. Again, there were wide gaps, and Pakistan exploited those gaps. They sent in terrorists. At Hilkaka, they actually had an operation theatre at 12,000 feet altitude. Pakistani army doctors were there who were treating terrorists who were injured in fighting with the Indian army troops. So a detailed plan was drawn out. General N.C. Widge was then the army chief. General Lider was again a para commando and the div commander. So they actually surrounded all those areas. A sustained operation was mounted. That kind of sustained operations are not being seen right now. Of course, they're saying the numbers are not the same. That time 100 terrorists had congregated in one area and they were spreading out. This time they're saying there are about 25 to 30, but not, Survesh level, but at a smaller level, such operations are required. That kind of a sustained effort is not seen right now.
General Sanjay Kulkarni, is it largely because we've pulled troops out of this area? These are already very high forested mountains where patrolling at any point is difficult, and if you pull some troops out, it increases the gaps between where our forces are deployed. Is that really the only reason, or do you see some geopolitical factors as well? We're heading into election season in India. The Pakistani economy is a bit of a mess and is getting worse. And therefore, what do you make of the timing and the nature of the terror attacks that we're seeing, General Kulkarni?
Rahul, multiple factors. There are multiple factors. Well, redeployment could have been one at that point of time, but obviously the troops have been made up. So all those gaps have been filled up. That is not a major problem. The second thing is we now know for sure that China and Pakistan are our enemies. We do not expect them to be behaving friendly, and therefore we must be prepared for it. Thirdly, very important is the proximity with the LOC and the forested area that it is. And if you look back, Poonch and Rajouri, right from the times of 1947, had been a problem. And therefore, we expect anything. But notwithstanding, for the last about 20 years or so, you can safely say that this area had been taken off. Like the entire area had been cleared of the militants over there. But now there are multiple factors that have taken place. South of Pir Panjal, the activities have actually increased in the last about a year or so. You can say September, October, November, this year itself, the kind of incidents that have taken place. This is again primarily because the valley seems to be under control. Valley seems to be looking for development, looking for, after the abrogation of Article 370, a lot of good activities have taken place. And therefore, Pakistan's in the back foot. Pakistan seems to be thinking that if that be so, the proxy war is not working well there, let's try south of Pir Panjal. Easier to infiltrate, though thickly forested, very much easier for them. But very important is the kind of double speaks, deceitful conducts that comes out from within our own country, from various political parties who've been involved into it. I think that also has been taken advantage of, because irrespective of the south.
No, but let's leave the politics aside, General. The army should be able to stop this. I mean, you're getting attacked again and again, and those attacks are successful. We'll deal with the politics in a moment, but why aren't we being able to stop this?
Absolutely, Rahul, there is no denying the fact that we also need to pull up our socks. We also need to ensure that the strategy has to change, because they will do what they're doing. We have now got to ensure that despite it being forested, despite there being one track, despite the areas where you can be ambushed, we have to be very, very vigilant. Primarily, we have helicopters, we have drones, we have communication, all kinds of, we are able to monitor everything. Despite that, maybe at certain point of time, because of thickly forested area, one. Secondly, the extremely bad weather. And thirdly, because over days on, weeks on, months on, there are people who are logistically sustaining these militants who we all know come from Pakistan. That there is no denying the fact that Pakistan has been sending them. That is what they're supposed to be doing, because they believe in bleeding India with 1,000 cuts. If that is what their philosophy is, we have to ensure that they must not succeed, because this is where the logistic support being provided by the people over there. Now, to add to all this, now we find that the Pahadis, if they've been given the scheduled tribe status, the Bakarwals and the Gujars get upset. You find in the entire thing, you find Rajouri, Poonch being included in that delimitation with Anantnag. Some people will get. So multiple factors are operating. There's no denying the fact that China also wants de-escalation in a little manner, that there is some pull-out of troops that can take place from Eastern Ladakh. Obviously, Pakistan working as its proxy behaves the way it is behaving in south of Pir Panjal.
Okay, Yashovardhan Azad, from an intelligence perspective, and I want to point this out to our viewers, that this is not a terror attack that happened very close to the line of control. This happened 10 kilometers plus, almost 12 kilometers away from the LOC. What that means is that it's not as if they just sneaked in. They'd been around for a while. They had adequate logistical bandobast for themselves where they were stationed, from where they were able to launch this attack. So it's not like they came in right before the attack. What that suggests is that maybe because of the fact that we thinned out our troops in that area, the terrorists have once again taken advantage, and now we have these entrenched terror positions which have formed, and therefore they're being able to come out, stake out, attack the Indian army and get away. What are you making of this from an intelligence perspective,
Basically,
Yashovardhan?
three things. You're absolutely right. After all, this was an intelligence operation where they were doing these cordon and search operations in that particular time, and to beef up the security arrangements during that time, they were ambushed. First of all, the proximity is there with the LOC and the thinning down of the troops. It's a little difficult to man, and that's why many experts have, focused and concentrated on the fact that there has to be a better security management at the LOC. Number two, definitely the Pir Panjal, the high reaches of this area, have excellent, hiding places, caves, and there is also a kind of a guerrilla tactics which they are employing. The third thing is also some tactics have changed. It's difficult to trap their communication. They are getting the locals to convey their messages. So there is a gap. There is definitely a gap, and some kind of redrawing of strategy is essential. Now, in the last 3 years, this area has become alive. This area has also become alive because, relatively in Kashmir, you see things are slightly better. I mean, whether it's because of vacuum of leadership, whether it's difficult to cross over at that particular time, these are things all to be analyzed. And there could be a plausible thing of join with China or whatever. But the fact remains that wherever there is some kind of a gap, the enemy intrusion is going to be there. So I agree with you. There has to be a redrawing of strategy, better intelligence, grid to be set up for this particular area in focus, and also the army redrawing their strategy to completely scout this area. These are the three things I think which are...
Sunil Ji Bhatt joins us. He's our reporter from Jammu. He's travelled up to Rajouri and to Poonch to track this encounter. What's the latest situation on the ground? Is the encounter completely over? Have these terrorists been found out and neutralized, or are they still out on the loose somewhere in the forest near Poonch?
Well, Rahul, early since morning, the security forces, whether it was the Indian Army, Jammu and Kashmir Police or the CRPF, they launched a massive search operation across the length and breadth of Dera Ki Gali, Baflias and the adjoining areas. Unfortunately, the security forces haven't got any success yet as far as tracing those terrorists are concerned. But the security forces are on their job, and the priority is to trace those terrorists as soon as possible. And the security forces also want to ensure that these terrorists don't manage to flee, because in the, if we go in the recent past, many encounters have taken place in the twin border districts of Rajouri and Poonch, and ultimately what used to happen that many a times terrorists manage to flee. So this is a matter of huge concern because, the terrain is very difficult. The entire stretch is surrounded by dense forests, mountains. Sometimes the visibility is very low, weather is inclement, so it's proving to be a big challenge for the security forces, particularly for the Indian Army. And questions are being raised, Rahul, that why are we losing our brave hearts? Senior officers have lost their lives. Para-commandos have lost their lives. So there seems to be that whether, SOPs are not being properly adhered to. So this definitely calls for a proper, thorough review of the entire security management, particularly in the twin border districts of Rajouri and Poonch, because in the last 2 years, Pakistan is now focusing on these two hilly districts of Jammu region, because after the abrogation of Article 370 and 35A, there was a massive crackdown on terrorism and terror ecosystem in the Kashmir Valley. Funding of separatists was choked, and as a result of that, terrorists felt suffocated in the Kashmir Valley. Now Pakistan and terrorists are focusing on south of Pir Panjal. In the last 2 years, many terrorists have managed to infiltrate from the line of control, and as per our sources in the security establishment, as many as 20 to 25 terrorists are still present on the upper reaches of Rajouri and Poonch. And Rahul, what is worrisome is that most of these terrorists are Pakistanis, and they are highly trained and highly equipped. So they are equipped with modern weapons. So it's going to be a big challenge for the security forces in the coming days. Rahul.
So Gaurav, from what I've understood, there's an Indian Army convoy and the vehicle gets ambushed, which means they start attacking from different directions, this vehicle that's coming. So it's not like an IED explosion, it's a proper ambush. Is this, according to your sources in the army, the handiwork of regular terrorists, or does it seem to have a hybrid mix of potential Pak army soldiers as well?
So increasingly, there are ex-soldiers of Pakistan army because of unemployment in Pakistan. They are actually being paid better money to become terrorists and come into India and carry out these terror strikes. Rahul, there's an eerie similarity to this compared to what happened just a couple of months ago. Terrorists with body cams are also filming it. So it's quite like the Islamic State terror where they use.
So what are these
cams.
two outfits? That are claiming
one is
responsibility.
TRF is the Lashkar-e-Taiba's the Resistance Front, and PAFF is the Jaish-e-Mohammed's secular name, if I may.
Anti-fascist front.
Anti-fascist front, People's Movement for Anti-Fascism. So, because Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed were banned, because there was global attention on radical Islamist terror, because of terror strikes even in the West, these people came up with so-called secular names for a terrorist organization, so it would look like an anti-fascist front and get approval of the left liberal cabal even in the West. That is why these names were given. But they're Lashkar-e-Taiba terrorists, they're Jaish-e-Mohammed terrorists. Rahul, they use body cams, they film it, they use it for
we haven't
propaganda.
seen that footage.
We have access to some of that footage, including the what happened to our soldiers.
Some was put out by TAF as well.
That's right, Rahul, and by PAFF and by TRF, and they claim responsibility to do all these terror attacks. Apart from the gaps, Rahul, when the situation is bad, look at the concentration, troop density in Kashmir and the troop density in the Jammu or south of Pir Panjal and north of Pir Panjal. It's much higher north of Pir Panjal in the Kashmir Valley because there's apprehension. This area had actually been declared terror-free just 3 years ago.
No,
they said there are no terrorists here. They're all dead.
But that's
so
why
they removed troops and then terrorists came in once again.
Syed Zafar Islam, given all the claims the government's been making off late about being able to have eliminated or vastly reduced terrorism, some of these repeated attacks in quick succession really raise very serious questions about the claim that your government makes that Jammu and Kashmir terrorism has declined one after another. If these terrorists can carry out these attacks, it clearly remains a danger that's alive and kicking.
Well, Rahul, first of all, I would like to convey condolences on behalf of my party to the family who lost their brave ones. These soldiers have made their supreme sacrifice for their country, and we must salute them first. Having said that, let me respond to the question you have asked. See, terrorism cannot be eliminated in one day. It was there for ages, last 20 years, and these terrorists were somehow been supported by the local parties there, local parties, prominent parties in J&K, and particularly I'm talking about the National Conference and the party headed by Muftis, and also being supported by the earlier UPA government. So they were very strong in the valley, and their approach was very different. Now they have last 9 years, and particularly after 2019, having abrogated Article 370, things have changed. You see the number of terrorist attacks have come off significantly. You see the number of soldiers who have laid their life and made supreme sacrifice for the nation. It has come off very significantly. The stone pelting has come off, absolutely has become zero. It's a full stop to stone pelting. There are many things which we have seen in last 4 years, and particularly in 9 years, particularly last 4 years. This and now number of terrorists also been identified, and the number is much less compared to what it was.
Okay, let Mohan Kumaramangalam respond to this, because I have a multi-year trend line which I'll put out on the screen right now. If you see the graph, the number of terror attacks as an aggregate is indeed coming down. This is terrible what's happened, and there is no condoning the fact that the terrorists got away, and it's highly, highly unfortunate. But if you look at the number of terror attacks from a peak of 342 in 2017, at this moment it's at 44, and every year that line seems to be coming down. Terror attacks is coming down, security forces, civilians killed is coming down. So the multi-year trend line is tending downwards, and that mercifully is what is of relief. What?
Rahul, did Syed Zafar Islam just say that the previous Congress government supported terrorists? Did I hear him correctly? And that's a disgusting comment to begin with. And I'm not going to take the bait. There is no politics to be had in this terror attack. We stand firmly with the army and we stand firmly with the Indian government against this. And my heart goes out to those who have lost their loved ones, the families of the fallen. I want to say that, yes, the trend line certainly supports it. But I would say that in 2014, the number of security personnel we lost were 47 in the year. Today, we have 32. Many of your distinguished panelists have made very good points about the region, about the fact that in the last 24 months, we've had a lot of activity in the Rajouri and Poonch region, and the terrain really gives itself to be ideal for these terrorists to come and attack our armed forces. I wonder aloud if there are some unmanned surveillance operations that could be carried out to prevent this. I know the defense minister went there in May and tried to see that if we could shore up defenses. There clearly is a need to focus on that area in particular. But I'm going to say this unequivocally, there is no politics to be had in this.
Okay.
This is an attack on India and we stand against it united.
So I now want to come to the question of how should India respond? Remember, after the Uri terror attack, there was a surgical strike that was carried out. Then we had the Balakot airstrikes that happened as well. But this is at a level where does it invite that kind of a counter cross-border operation, whether it is through the army, the air force, or maybe this time even the navy or the missile forces or whatever it is that we decide to use? Or are the Pakistanis deliberately keeping the threshold just below boiling point where India feels bad but doesn't have enough reason to launch a counter-terror publicized attack? There will be some action on the ground at a tactical level, but do we raise the threshold? So Gaurav, A, there's an election that's coming in the next 5 months. B, this doesn't reflect well on the Modi Sarkar because they were in parliament recently making all these claims, and soon after that there is this terror attack. So there will be, we already saw what Uddhav Thackeray's Sena said about all your claims on terrorism not amounting to very much. Does this then put pressure on the security establishment to respond in a way that the enemy is taught a third lesson after Uri, after Balakot?
So, Rahul, the real pressure is yet to come. The coming spring of 2024, before elections in Kashmir, is likely to be very hot. When Yashwardhan Azad is here, intelligence community is talking about it. Right now, there are between 250 to 300 terrorists waiting at launch pads. The BSF has said that on camera, on record. And these are launch pads south of Pir Panjal, north of Pir Panjal, because it's all snowed in. All of that will escalate. The real escalation will come just in the run-up to elections in a way to show the Modi government in poor light, is what intelligence agencies believe. All these told claims of Article 370, a muscular government, all of that will be challenged in this multi-pronged. There could also be something all along the India-China line of actual control. Less likely there, more likely at the LC. You're absolutely right, Rahul. 40 soldiers were killed, 40 CRPF personnel were killed in Pulwama, and India was forced to respond, or India responded with the Balakot. Just now, 35 soldiers have been killed, but Pakistan very cleverly is keeping the threshold level low. It's like boiling that frog in water. That frog doesn't realize he's being boiled because the temperature has been increased very gradually. 5, 5, 5, 5, 5. It's added up to 35, not yet 40, but then there is no talk of surgical strike this time.
We don't know. We don't know because this government has taken a very clear position that there will be retaliation. The question is, General Kulkarni, retaliation to what? Is this just one second. Is this just a regular terror attack, and therefore, while there can be a tactical response on the ground, as there often is after this kind of a terror attack against your local adversary, or does this require a higher order retaliation of the kind that we saw in Uri, of the kind that we saw in Balakot? Because what Pakistan is clearly doing is completely unacceptable. How would you look at this very important question?
Rahul, what happens is just below the threshold point Pakistan is operating. There is no denying the fact, because we have to treat this entire area as hotbed for terrorists and have to handle it well. And if we know that 250, 300 terrorists are operating from the launch pads and they're visible, I think there should be no reason why we should not knock them off. It is important. Now, we may have to use for knocking off these terrorists across, but within a certain area and limit, because until and unless we do that, the root cause has to be eliminated. Pakistan will continue to use terror. It will use proxy war. It will use all kinds of tactics for the hybrid warfare that is over there. We have to ensure that at no point of Forget about the politics. Forget about the parties which are in power. It is our responsibility to ensure that all these hotbed terrorist launch pads have to be knocked off.
Syed Zafar Islam, respond to what General Kulkarni is saying, and many like him. After Uri, after Balakot, there is now amongst the forces, and even amongst those who are watching at this time, an expectation that there will be a response. It cannot be that our forces get attacked repeatedly. Last time the special forces were killed as well. Now you've got the armored corps being targeted. It cannot be that we keep getting attacked and that we can't just neutralize just those terrorists who are involved in this encounter. There has to be a bigger message that's sent to the adversary.
Well, Rahul, I'm sure everyone knows how our government reacts. And we always known to be giving befitting reply to response to Pakistan. Having said that, the situation and the exact situation is being assessed by the government, and appropriate action will be taken, which includes surgical strike, which includes many other action which may be required to neutralize not only the terrorists here, but also giving a very firm message.
No, are you just saying that because that's the right thing to say? Are you saying it because you got some information and reason to believe that that's how we intend to react?
No, if you just have to do a back testing of our government policy. We have always given free hand to our soldiers to take appropriate action, whatever they feel appropriate at that point in time. There is absolutely no message except that they are authorized and empowered to take appropriate action at that point in time, and no message will be given from Delhi or elsewhere. That is the message, and same thing goes even when the situation warrants. Surgical strike, air strike have been conducted, and this is something which we have demonstrated. We may demonstrate again if the government feels that this is the right time.
Electorally, you know what General Kulkarni is saying: smoke out the terrorists who had these pads. If you can find the pad, and whether you use rockets, you use mortars, you use depending on what force you want to use, you can find a way of attacking those terror launch pads. If that were to happen, there'd be political consequences. Last time, what happened after Pulwama turned out to be a game changer. We're in that period where you're building up to the elections. Nationalism, everybody uniting behind the flag is something that potentially could help the Bharatiya Janata Party. But this is also a military problem. So how would you look at the issue of people, especially what Zafar Islam is saying, backtest us, see what we did something last time, we'll do something this time?
I think we should refrain from any kind of chest thumping and advertising and sloganeering that we are the kings. What we should do, number one, is that the army knows how to react and how to give a reply at the local level. We should allow them to do it and tell them to do it. Because it's a matter of concern. 59 people have died this year, including terrorists and our security forces. And it's very, very critical now to keep it on a low key and improve our security at the LOC. That's number one. Number two, what Gaurav said is an extremely important point, that the elections are coming. And mind you, Rahul, I'm telling you, there'll be a kind of an intensification, whether in the form of these attacks or whether in the form of creating more and more dissatisfaction or radicalization in the valley. For that, we need the intelligence machinery to be really geared up, to be empowered, and that's extremely important. So in that respect, again, I will focus on redrawing of our strategy. Smoking out is not easy. We can say all this, but it's not easy at all. So it has to be a very sustained kind of an operation, redrawing of strategy and gearing up the intelligence machinery. More important that at the LOC, the security management has to be much, much better.
Mohan Kumar Mangalam, are you concerned that in a very roundabout kind of fashion, especially because of what happened post-Pulwama, this actually helps the BJP? It helps the BJP because if there is a counter reaction, like you're already hearing Zafar Islam say, we will do a surgical strike, we will attack the enemy where it hurts, and then again nationalism, patriotism, anti-Pakistan, all that sentiment comes to the fore, and it helped the BJP in 2019. We're in that same stretch again where it's advantage BJP, disadvantage opposition.
Rahul, if that happens, it so happens. I don't think, I'm not a warmonger, and I'm in complete agreement with Yashwardhan Azadji when he says that these things should be dealt by the army at the local level. I will take one point from his, when he was talking, he said that the locals convey messages, their messages. And I think maybe one thing we can do as a responsible government is restore statehood to Jammu and Kashmir as soon as possible, so that those who feel disenfranchised enough to convey messages for terrorists start feeling like they're part of our country completely again. I think that's very important.
Okay,
so apart from any military
what could
action,
we have done differently? Remember, this is an army convoy. These are terrorists, and these are very vast mountains, right? It's not a small stretch, vast mountain. They were attacked from a hilltop. Where do you think this process went wrong, and what should be done to prevent it?
Rahul, there are two things. If you notice that gypsy and if you notice this truck, we need more armoured personal carriers. We need more armoured fighting vehicles where the opposition can play a very critical role. More important than restoring statehood right now is giving the army armoured fighting vehicles, giving the army more bulletproof jackets and helmets. While they're coming in numbers, more are required. More night vision devices.
Now, are you saying that everybody moves around instead of moving around in a jeep or a jonga, they're moving around in APCs?
The moment you're going in for a look, the terrorists know your standard operating procedures now. The terrorists know they'll switch on their Thuraya or your signal intelligence will catch it. You will mount a team. There will be a contact. You will send in additional forces, and that's where they're lying in wait. They're lying in ambush. So they know your standard operating procedures. You need to change your standard operating procedures. I'm a civilian. I know there is standard operating procedures. Point one. Point two, we need more armored fighting vehicles for our soldiers. They cannot be going on soft-top gypsies
but that can't be changed overnight either.
Which is where, so now Indian companies are manufacturing these trucks. More of these trucks need to be brought in, and that is where the opposition needs to put the government, in their crosshairs or on the mat. Give our army more resources that are required as of now, and that is where senior officers need to. Also, some of the senior officers, if you've had 5 such instances, there is something that needs to be done by the leadership in that area. That leadership is not able to produce solutions.
No, this is absolutely true. One attack can be a one-off. If it's happening again and again in the same region, there are very serious issues of how the forces are operating, which need to be looked at. There is no going away from that. And the fact also is we are heading towards elections in Jammu and Kashmir, elections nationally, and this is where the enemy also gets active. And especially given the fact that some forces were removed, a full division was removed from this region, taken to the line of actual control, suggests that Pakistan knows there's a vulnerability and an opening here, and very naturally its best friend China is also prodding them to go and poke and provoke, potentially wanting us to bring some forces back from the LAC, or at least create that pressure, that that tension in decision making. So our enemies are vigilant. Our nation and our army too needs to remain vigilant. My heart goes out to all those who were killed in this attack and their families, their loved ones. And I just hope that, we're hearing from Zafar Islam that there will be consequences. And I think there need to be consequences, because we saw that in Uri, we saw that after Pulwama. The terrorists and their handlers get a very stern message that you cannot mess with the Indian state. You cannot mess with the Indian army. That message, that fear needs to be created. It worked for a while, but then it's like the kutte ki pooch, it bounces back just as you leave it. So therefore, maybe it's time for another very stern message to be delivered. And I'm quite certain, from what I know of the Indian army, that a message will be delivered sooner than later. Whether it will be spectacular, announced, that we don't know. Uri was announced. Balakot was announced. Whether it will be tactical and on the ground, or whether it will be announced in public, we don't know. But there will be, mind you and make no mistake, consequences for what just went down in this area. Thank you to our guests for joining us. Sunil G. Bhatt and Gaurav will keep reporting on the story. You don't board the NewsTrack. There is no end to the MP suspension showdown. Opposition parties led by the Congress staged a protest at Jantar Mantar in New Delhi, carrying placards that read "Democracy Expelled." While the opposition is accusing the centre of caging dissent, top Modi ministers have accused Rahul Gandhi of instigating parliamentary disruptions.
Indian politics at boiling point. Mass suspensions of opposition MPs and parliament security breach are the biggest flashpoints this political season. Opposition MPs from the India bloc took to the streets on Friday in a march from Parliament to protest against the suspension of 146 lawmakers. Bearing placards that said, "Parliament caged, democracy expelled," leaders from opposition parties upped the ante against centre. Congress President Mallikarjun Kharge took aim at Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Home Minister Amit Shah for not addressing the security breach in Parliament.
ऐसे कहीं जो 147 एमपीज में दूर दूर बैठे थे, मुंह भी नहीं खोले थे, बोलने का बाद उनको समय भी नहीं मिला, लेकिन उसको सस्पेंड किया गया।
पार्लियामेंट के बाहर
Congress MP Rahul Gandhi slammed the Modi government for suspending the MPs for merely asking questions on the Parliament security breach.
मतलब इन्होंने ये नहीं कहा कि 150 सांसदों को बाहर कर दिया, पार्लियामेंट के बाहर खड़ा कर दिया। ये सवाल मीडिया ने नहीं पूछा, क्यों किया, कैसे किया।
The opposition has been rallying against the BJP, accusing the ruling party MPs of causing disruptions whenever opposition lawmakers tried to bring up the matter for discussion in the House.
लोकतंत्र की मां की हत्या हो गई है। अब लोकतंत्र की मां को पुनर्जीवित करना, क्योंकि विदेश जाते हैं तो सीना ठोक के बोलते हैं मदर ऑफ डेमोक्रेसी से आया हूं। अब क्या सीना ठोकेंगे पीएम साहब?
आज देश के संविधान और जनतंत्र को बचाना है, वो संकल्प लिए हैं और यही कहा कि भारत जुड़ेगा, इंडिया जीतेगा।
The centre hit back at Rahul Gandhi, claiming he's backing parliament intruders.
Many MPs, कुछ लोगों को हमने सस्पेंड किया शुरुआत के दिन में, बाद में सब लोग आके रिक्वेस्ट करना शुरू किया, हमको बाहर जाना है, हमको सस्पेंड करो करके। ये कांग्रेस पार्टी का लेवल है।
With nearly 150 MPs suspended and bills passed without any participation by the opposition, the last parliament session of 2023 has deepened the divide between the Modi government and the opposition. Bureau Report, India Today.
This is where we wrap up the NewsTrack tonight. For your time and your trust, thank you very much. I look forward to seeing you at 8 p.m. Monday evening. Till then, from all of us here, goodbye, good night.